get to the point about differential fees in a second. But as you know, the LEO recommended earlier this year that we essentially charge the full freight cost for students that have reached the 100-unit plateau. I think our take on that is that we're kind of reluctant to bring in those changes by July 1. I think we'd like to make sure that these ideas are pretty well vetted. And, there could be some exceptions in there. The returning student who got their BA 15 years ago and is now coming back to that nursing program. I think we want to make sure we don't capture people like that in that net. So those are ideas that we're going to look at over the next year. I think the Student Success Task Force in particular will be taking a look at that. And frankly, if we get to this area of an all cuts budget where we're down $600, $700, $800 million and maybe for a long time, we're going to have to take a good hard look at a lot of issues, a lot of things that we probably didn't want to do before, limit our mission maybe even. So there's a lot of tough challenges ahead for us, no doubt. In terms of the differential fees, I think that's an area that's probably going to generate some discussion. I do note that we have about 175 different career tech programs right now, so I think there becomes an issue about, what do we charge each one? How do we go through that process of figuring out who gets what? So I think we want to take a pretty serious look at that before we ran ahead with something as well, but it's an idea we may have to pursue at some point. Thank you. Continuing on with the presentation, the next slide, again, I'll be brief at these last couple, shows the funding levels over the past 10 years or so. You'll note that at the end we have two versions of the 2011-12 year. The first one shows the budget reductions as of the March agreement, and after that we show the reduction that we would take under the LAO options plan that came out in February. Not to say it's their recommendations. Certainly we would recommend a lesser hit, but that is one of the proposals at least on the table. So we do want to show you that. And if you look at the final page, that shows the enrollment figures over the years. If you look in the middle of the page at the 2009-10 level, what we've done on that top part of the bar is put in the number of students that we estimate were turned away that year without service. That's about 140,000 for that year. If we carry that total level of demand of the 2009-10 level through to 2011-12 and combine it with the funding reductions we've already received, we see that we're turning away hundreds of thousands of students, probably over 400,000 for 11-12. And again, that assumes that demand for our services is flat since 2009-10, which we suspect is greatly understating the demand. And obviously that figure only grows should we get to an all cuts budget, as we show in the last bar. So.
Thank you very much for that information. Again, sorry for the interruption, but we just had to get our questions answered. Thank you. Next, we have Steve Bullard, Higher Education Director from the Legislative Analyst's Office. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Steve Bullard with the Analyst. Just a couple of summary comments based on the testimony you've heard so far. And again, I think that the segments do a good job of portraying what it means to be looking at collectively $1.4 billion in cuts in the current year budget and potentially more to come. There's a couple of key points I'd want to make. One is that there's a distinction, I think, between your budget and policy choices on what level of cuts do you want to be imposing in the area of higher education? And when I say want, meaning that you find that you need to, given the budget environment. What level of cuts do you find it necessary to impose? But the second question, which I think is important that you keep before you, is what should those cuts look like? What should they result in? And the segments have given you a number of different kinds of views of some of the levers they have. Partly this can be backfilled with tuition and fee increases, partly through enrollment reductions. Those are the two areas that probably most will affect students. And you've adopted trailer bill language in your 11-12 budget that you've passed, expressing your intent that those kinds of cuts be minimized, that the impact on student enrollment and fees be minimized. So what else is left? There's a number of categories you've heard from. There's reducing costs and administrative overhead. There is, as Mr. Turnage pointed out, collapsing some of the bureaucratic structure. There is additional efficiencies that the universities have been able to find in the form of purchasing, and the list goes on and on and on. This is something the administration, I think, was really emphasizing in January when they put forward their proposal, saying they want to see the cost of instruction coming down. So you have a mix of things you're looking at, and I think our main argument to you is, and this is consistent, I think, with what the segments were saying, that you should be part of that conversation, not just on what the level of cuts should be, but what those cuts should translate into. That said, I'd make another point, which, again, I think is really supportive of what the segments are saying, and that is you can't make cuts of this level without affecting services. And so, again, it's not a question of how do you do it without affecting services. The question is which services you affect. I think what you're seeing these days, and I think it's constructive, is we are looking, we collectively, the administration, the segments, the legislature, LAO, are kind of re-examining how higher education works and how it's funded and how it's coordinated and what its goals and mission are and how things are prioritized, as Mr. Troy is just pointing out. I think that's a healthy thing, and I think it's a conversation that we ought to be continuing. Mr. Lentz is pointing out he would like to see a financial stability plan, and again, I think I would agree again that we've had a very volatile, uncertain level of funding. It makes it very hard for the universities to plan. It makes it hard for families to plan. That's unfortunate. It might be something we're living with for a little bit, but what I would really encourage is when you are able to return making investments in higher education, I wouldn't just simply try and restore to get back to business as usual, because we've uncovered a number of very important aspects of higher education, coordination, transfer, on how it is governed and operated. And we would encourage you to continue that work in order to ensure that we have a healthier, more robust system.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I can make one more comment, because it's rare that I get to say I agree with almost everything that the analyst says, but I agree with almost everything that the analyst says.
Make the most of the moment.
The one thing that yes, exactly. Thank you. The one thing that I think is critical, and I don't want to have lost, is the timing of a given decision by the legislature or the administration in when you're able to complete at a point in time some budget deliberations that gives us a sense of what our options are. So, for instance, we don't have an option right now to reduce enrollment in 11-12. We're past that point in time. We've already sent the letters to the students saying, you know, we're going to take you based on keeping enrollment flat, granted, but it was a priority for us not to reduce enrollment. We're getting perilously close to a point in time where we couldn't make a fair decision upon students and their families to raise fees in the fall. We might be able to do something if we have a sense of what the budget's going to be for the university by the middle of June, to do something in July that would be mid-year. But it's unfair to think that. So it really is imperative that you recognize the options that are available to the higher education segments given the point in time and when the budget deliberations are completed.
I appreciate. Oh, can you hear me? Could you hear me before?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate what you're saying, and we heard that those same sentiments yesterday when we were in the K-12 segment as well. And it's very important, I think, for everyone to understand that we can't do adjustments in the fall. We can't do adjustments with education in the fall. We're setting the year, and even that, it's unfortunate that we're cutting it as close as we are when we get down to the end of June as a deadline date. But we certainly can't expect education to plan ahead or cross their fingers for a change that may or may not happen to the budget in October or November timeframe. The decisions have to be made, the money is allocated, and the school year is set. So I think we heard that certainly from everyone in the K-12 world, and hearing that again, it's just unrealistic to think that we've got to make our decisions by the deadline that we have, and otherwise the consequences would be very severe for education. So thank you for that. I also took the note down of a financial stability plan. I thought that was a great comment. We certainly heard it from all of you, and something that we want to pursue once we're through this crunch time that we're in right now. Thank you very much. We'll move on and do our overview of a presentation on the capital outlay financing by the Legislative Analyst's Office. And then we'll have some individual reports on some of those projects.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve Boylard again with the analyst. The sergeant's passing on a handout, but I'm just trying to set the stage a little bit for some of the capital outlay choices you have coming before you. And I've been asked to summarize a little bit about how higher education has been financed. And your agenda, I think, does a good job of laying out some of the key components, such as the use of general obligation bonds and lease revenue bonds. Historically, you've really focused on general obligation bonds. And the last general obligation bond in higher education was in 2006 for about $3 billion for the whole system. That money is largely exhausted. There's still some being spent at the community colleges, but largely have run out of the GO bonds. And so increasingly you find to turn towards lease revenue bonds. These do not require voter approval. They have a slightly higher interest rate, about 0.5% higher interest rate, so the cost is a little bit more. But they operate in a very similar fashion and provide an opportunity to invest in infrastructure of the universities and the colleges up front and then pay that out over a period of time, typically 25 to 30 years. What you see in the handout, I've tried to give you a sense of what your kind of cumulative debt looks like in these bond payments, these bonds debt that's been accrued. And as of the other month, on page 1 there, for all sectors of the government, you see about $81 billion of outstanding bond debt. That is principal that the state will have to pay off in the coming years. Added to that is additional authorized debt, authorized bonds that have not yet been sold, and these are another $46 billion. So you put those together, you've got about $127 billion in potential, again, principal debt that you've used to invest in infrastructure that will have to be paid off over time. The governor's higher education proposal would add about $250 million of additional bond debt for higher education. The next page, and as you see in that, higher education share of this total pot of debt is about $13 billion, with about another 1.3 potentially to be that's been authorized but not yet sold. The next page shows, okay, so what does that do to your budget? When you have that much debt, what does that do to your budget? Well, annually you have to pay debt service, obviously. And page 2 shows you what the 10-11 budget looks like, your general fund spending towards that debt, that $84 billion worth of debt we're talking about. Totals pretty close to $6 billion in the current year, $5.76 billion in the current year. Higher education share is just a little bit over $1 billion. So when you look at the higher education budget, again, about $1 billion is paying for facilities, and this is, I think, there's nothing that's appropriate that the cost of those buildings are being used in the current year, and so part of the cost is being incurred in the current year. But that uses up room in your budget. That your first call on general fund is having to pay off these debt obligations. So total about $6 billion in the current year is going towards these debt obligations. And then the third page, the final page, gives you a sense of over time what's happened to the debt service ratio. What percentage of the state's general fund goes towards paying off this debt? And as you see, in the mid-'80s, it was pretty low, 1.8% or so. And that's come up and down over time. Right now, it's at a historic high. around 6% of the state general fund. And that's really for two reasons. One is there's been an amount of debt that's been accruing, but at the same time, your general fund has shrunk. And so, the denominator is smaller, and so therefore the percentage increases. You see a dotted line there that suggests if the tax extensions were not to happen, then that bond debt service would take up a larger share of that reduced general fund amount, and so it would get up closer to 8%. We've emphasized before that there is no one right number what the debt service ratio should be, but I think the point we really want to emphasize as just an overall principle and idea for you to be thinking about as you consider how to finance facilities is that the debt you take on today is part of your required spending tomorrow. And so as you're trying to find a way through this budget crisis and be thinking about correcting this structural budget imbalance, part of your considerations will have to be what the out-year bond debt looks like. Again, right now it's at a level where about 6-7% of your coming years will be spent towards this debt. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just a consideration. So with that setting the stage, we think that you have a number of proposals before you that my understanding is we'll be going through on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you very much. And we'll now go on to our panelists that we have here. And I guess do we have Stan Huga? Is it?
I think it's going to be Carlos Ochoa.
Or Carlos? I'll let you introduce yourself. Oh, I'm sorry. Try again.
Carlos Ochoa, Department of Finance.
How many people does it take? It's my fault. I apologize. But yes, please. Are you...
Department of Finance supports the three proposals before you.
Okay. So you don't have a specific report.
The segments do.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and have the segments talk about the different capital projects, and it's good to know ahead of time that you don't have a problem with them. That's good news. Wow, we kind of told the end of the story before the beginning. Yes, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Madam Chair, my name is Fred Harris with the Chancellor's Office. I oversee the facilities program there for the community college system. And here today to affirm not only Mr. Ochoa's recommendation, but the governor's budget, but it's before you. We have 3 projects in our pipeline. Normally we have 80 to 90 projects, so that's somewhat of a testament that the pipeline has collapsed. But of the residuals that we have left over in bonds, a lot of them are cost savings from other projects that we're able to move forward. 3 projects in the governor's budget, and we commend them to you.
All right. Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Vi San Juan with the California State University. For our program, we have 5 projects that we're requesting. 2 are high-priority seismic projects for us, including with the Warren Hall replacement at Cal State University East Bay, and 1 at San Jose State, which is a seismic project. 4 of the 5 projects were approved in the 10-11 budget year, and certainly support our continued growth with Channel Islands, a new campus for us where we're converting the former mental hospital at Camarillo. So I think we're doing a great job supporting the growth in spite of the budget reductions and picking up a lot of deferred maintenance and making it usable space. So I think that's very positive. With part of our capital program, with the LAO's comment as far as the amount of increase in funds for facilities, we do use an amount of the dollars to renew facilities, which are some of the items of buildings that have been around since the 20s. So there's a significant maintenance need and renewal need that we do use capital funds for. So that's one of our main sources, absent support budget funds. So we have found that to be very beneficial for us. We've been able to increase class sizes to help out the support budget, which it may increase the faculty, the number of students each faculty, but it also enables us to get more students through with lesser administrative costs. So 2 of the projects include large lecture spaces where providing space for over 100 students versus the, say, 45 station lecture spaces that are there now. It also helps the support side as we are able to reduce some of our space rental off campus. That's both for the Fresno project. It's a faculty office lab building which will address some Title IX issues, but provides adequate space for some faculty offices and labs for kinesiology. And for the one of the difficulties that our campuses have where the capital program helps is when we are able to build new buildings versus having to rent modulars. So when we renovate a building, if we're able to sequence capital projects, which allows us to not have to rent modulars while we vacate a building, that's part of our process with the capital program. So some of that cost would normally be a support budget cost. So I'm trying to frame some of these because there is a direct impact that we have as far as the support budget and how the capital budget tries to help the support budget as much as we can, not only with serving the students, but looking at a plan both of energy costs, making buildings more efficient, and how to reduce spending costs on facilities that are one-time use like a temp space. So a little bit of more overview. Certainly with the chart that is in the agenda, the CSU hopes to catch up with the UC funding from 10-11 as we're looking at $200 million in lease revenue bonds. The projects are key to our academic program, and we urge your support. Thank you.
Also, I don't know if I'm sure you've calculated this in, but I think it's something that we should at least mention the decrease in building costs right now. That there's actually where one good thing I guess is we're in a time where the dollars are going further. Is that something that you're seeing and you're able to? I just think we should comment on the fact that you're actually able to do more.
That's right. In fact, we're hoping for some. Two projects recently bid 20% below budget. So not only were we able to afford things we weren't sure we were going to, but even to the extent of being able to award photovoltaics on the roofs that we had built in. So, but we're having to hold. Waiting for cash flow to go forward, but it's a great climate right now, not only on state projects but non-state projects. So, and the job stimulus that the projects would provide across the systems would be terrific.
Thank you, Mr. Lenz. Oh, Mr. Berryhill.
What's the difference between the GO bonds and lease revenue bonds right now? The interest difference?
Teresa Gunn, Department of Finance. It's running about 0.5%, as Mr. Boilard said.
Just 0.5%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Our UCs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're requesting your support for the 2 projects that are identified on the agenda. The first is Scripps Institute of Oceanography Research and Support Facilities. Currently, they bring all of their equipment, their testing, their training on that equipment that they use on their ships and in doing their research into facilities that are World War II Quonset huts. So they were built in the 1940s. They're about to fall down, and we're taking a look at what, for a capital facilities project, is a small amount of money to try to replace those 10 Quonset huts, and I've noted in my notes here 4 latrine buildings that are currently at the facility. This will provide the facilities for about 495 staff, faculty, and postdocs who use the facilities, and 230 of our graduate students. So I don't know if you have any questions or issues with that particular project, but it's a fairly straightforward issue relative to the age of the current facilities that they're in. The second project deals with our Irvine Business Unit 2. And Madam Chair, you won't recall, but Mr. Berryhill, you might recall, this was a project that was before you last year. It went to the Two-House Conference Committee, was subsequently not approved. We did have some issues with a legislative analyst on space utilization that we spent quite a bit of time working with the analysts. We got them resolved. We resolved our, revised our proposal, and now we've brought that back. This is characterized as a growth project. It is the only state proposed funded business building at the campus. There are 2 other facilities at the campuses, but they have been built with non-state funds. This is growth literally from the 2000-2001 year. They haven't had any new facilities or additional facilities to accommodate the increasing demand. They have increased by about 25%. The number of undergraduates since just 2009-10 who are seeking some form of business major. They've added 2 new programs in business. They are overcrowded at the seams in the buildings that they're currently utilized. And this is a campus that at one time took advantage of a lot of off-campus lease space because they didn't have the resources to build these kind of facilities, and now find it more prudent to be able to go out there and meet the needs of the programs that are associated with these business schools. And we're requesting your support for this facility as well.
Thank you. And I'll just ask if, no, I think you can hear me. Is my mic on? Yeah, they can hear me. Oh, on the TV. Mic system. Any other comments or final comments from LAO at all on these capital projects? You don't have to make a comment. It's okay. It's 5:25 and can wrap it up.
Am I on? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Steve Boilard again. You know, real briefly and broadly with regard to these proposals, in general, you know, it's a very limited scope of proposals. I think what I tried to set up for you earlier is every year you have to make choices about how you're allocating funding, and at a time that you're looking at very significant cuts throughout the state budget, money that you commit in this way also is going to be part of your spending commitment. So it's simply to recognize the connection between these commitments and your state budget problem. That said, I think we would acknowledge that it is a good bid environment right now. There's an opportunity to get some lower cost projects put in place, and there are needs throughout the systems, particularly a focus for us has been fire life safety improvements. The growth, I guess the one that I would speak to is on UC, that the Irvine project. That is one that had been put forward last year that the legislature ultimately did not approve. The segment UC has rescoped that project, and we think that's a positive development. Except in, I guess, a couple of comments in the area of growth, as UC acknowledges. This growth at a time, accommodating growth at a time that the segment seems quite limited in terms of its ability to grow, in terms of funding, ability to grow enrollment, and with uncertainty about where, again, this rebenched world of higher education is going, it seems less compelling than it would be to address, say, a fire life safety kind of issue. So I don't think that we have any fundamental objections to these projects, but in terms of prioritizing, we think the growth projects would take a lower priority to fire life safety projects.
Madam Chair, just on the Irvine project, and then one general comment. The growth, this campus has done something that we would like to encourage and hope to get all of our campuses to do. They've looked at where the student demand is, and then they've shifted their resources on the support side to reduce some of the programs that don't have the great student demand and focus in the areas where there is significant demand. So I would agree with the analyst, the campus itself is not growing, but they are evaluating those programs where there's a high student demand, and this has been one of them for purposes of putting forth this facility and this recommendation. The second thing is, I think the state is in a catch-22 here. I don't disagree with the analysts that approving more projects is going to have a tendency to have additional debt service cost. But you've got a construction industry that's 20% unemployment. You've got a bid climate that's probably the best that we've ever seen. You've got, in some circumstances, and the Irvine project is one of them, where we've got a third of that project garnering, private support. So that aspect of it, where the university is going to be borrowing, is borrowing at a favorable time. And then a comment Mr. Harris made is, we collectively have scaled down our request to be just those projects that we think are either seismic, fire life, or safety, or what we characterize are critical to the growth demands on the campus, as pointed out by the Irvine campus. So I think you're in this catch-22. It's a difficult dilemma, but we've got shovel-ready projects sitting there waiting to go. And in scaling down our priorities, we hope that we can be helpful in some regard.
Thank you very much. Did we have one other wrap-up comment?
One other brief comment, Madam Chair. Judy Hyman with the Legislative Analyst's Office. For CSU projects, they have done a good job of addressing some concerns that were raised by our office and by the legislature last year, with one possible exception, which is that the Fresno State building, the planning and working drawings were approved in conference committee last year. This is a project that was initiated largely in response to Title IX concerns, Title IX deficiencies, so it's in support of the intercollegiate athletics program. And at the time, the chair said that the conference committee, would be more comfortable if CSU came back with a cost-sharing plan to share some of those costs associated with intercollegiate athletics, because that's not generally considered something that's a high priority use of state capital outlay funds, particularly in tight times. So that has not been addressed.
Okay, thank you for that information, and we'll continue to look at that as we move forward. We're going to be holding all of these issues open until the May revise, so we will be revisiting them very briefly later in the month or in upcoming meetings. I want to thank all of our panelists for their reports and appreciate all the information. I also appreciate the handouts. We're now going to move to public comment. We do have members of the public here who would wish to speak on some of these issues affecting the budget and higher education, and I'd invite them to come forward at this time, and we'd be very happy to hear from you. Please just introduce yourself, who you're associated with, and then that microphone, I think, is perfect if it's ready to go. And then if you could just keep your comments to 2 minutes, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Is this working? Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Jonathan Lightman on behalf of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. I just want to say, through the magic of smartphones, I have an answer to your question about unemployment rate by college attainment. So in March 2011, the state unemployment rate was 12.0%, according to the EDD. Bureau of Labor Statistics has the national unemployment rate at 8.8%. And on a national scale, they didn't find this for California, those with a BA or higher have an unemployment rate of 4.2%. So your point's well taken. I would just like to say, from the faculty's perspective in the California community colleges, there's a lot of fear right now, and everyone's waiting for the proverbial shoe to drop. As Mr. Choi mentioned, course sections are being shed left, right, and center. There is a concern that the colleges will move more towards the junior college model, and we think that that's a big mistake, that we would be favoring strictly the lower division courses moving to transfer, not recognizing the complexities of the student population today, unemployed Californians as well as military veterans and others coming back after years and seeking courses. And the idea that we would somehow charge more, we would charge more for career technical education, this is a very, very complicated issue. And, I think, as Mr. Choi mentioned, that we have so many programs that are career technical education related. So many of them move into many different pathways. And I would just like to share that there's a misnomer that we think in some minds that it's career technical education or academic. Actually, it's all academic. It's in the college system. Many of these programs not only need to align better with K-12, as we've tried with the SB 70 money, but also with the universities in the sense that many of these programs transfer, and they transfer to so many different arenas. So the idea that maybe in the long run we could look at some kind of differential funding mechanism may be appropriate. Differential fees, again, presents an extreme complication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi. I first wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to share my story with you. I'm here on behalf of the UC Student Association. My name is America Munoz, and I'm a second-year student at the University of California, Santa Barbara. In the 2 years I have been at UCSB, I have noticed major effects that the most recent budget cuts have had on our campus. This year, all of my professors' office hours, along with my teachers' assistants, have been reduced. For example, in one of my core classes, a class of 180 students, the professor's hours have been limited to 2 hours a week, as opposed to the 4 hours a week that professors was available last year. In another class of 240 students, there are only 2 teacher assistants who are available for a total of 4 hours a week to meet outside of class. Due to these strict hours and my intense work and class schedule, this limits me to oftentimes communicate with my professors and teacher assistants through email, and it doesn't surprise me when my emails don't get answered. With class availability getting worse, I fear not being able to take the needed classes in order to graduate on time. The classes I need in order to fulfill major requirements are usually filled with upper division students, while lower division students are forced to sign a waiting list with 100 other students trying to get into that same class. As a result, I am being forced to attend summer school classes, incurring extra costs for books and rents. This is money that I do not have and would not have to spend if classes were available throughout the school year. I am concerned about losing my Cal Grant due to income verification process that must now happen each year. This new process that was recently approved may disqualify me along with many other students who are at that borderline Cal Grant recipients. And if a student loses eligibility, that means that they have to somehow come up with thousands of dollars for next year's tuition and fees. My entire education is dependent on the financial aid, and the bulk of my aid comes from the Cal Grant. Losing this grant would mean that I would have to drop out of school. I ask that you take my story into consideration when making decisions that will affect my future and the future of all Californian students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today.
Good afternoon. Erica Romero on behalf of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. We wanted to put the emphasis a little bit on Latino students who now make up 1 out of every 2 students in California. And to give you some perspective, in the 5 years that our office has been open, the number of A through G eligible Latino students has gone from 20 percentage points to 25%. And we've seen increases at the UC, the CSU, and the community colleges. We told these first-generation students that they should be going to college, and they paid attention. So we're really hoping that the enrollment caps and the availability of courses doesn't set back the progress that we've seen for the Latino community. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, members of the Assembly. My name is Amra Jayusi. I am the student body president of CSU Chico. I'm here on behalf of the California State Student Association, the official voice of the CSU students. Much of the discussion today revolved around the governor's proposal and its impact on higher education, the CSU, UC, and the community colleges. I would like to narrow my focus on the impact that it'll have on the CSU students. The effects overall will be felt across the board. Not only will it be on enrollment, it'll also be on tuitions, the quality of our education, and the student services that we promised our students. In respect to enrollment, the CSU is projected to lose 10,000 qualified students, bringing the student population of the CSU to 410,000, a figure that was 450,000 only a few years ago. In regards to tuition, we're projected for the average CSU student to pay $4,884 next year, a 10% increase from this semester. It is also expected that individual CSU campuses will be cutting sections, which will impact students in 2 ways. One, classes will be more compact, more crowded, and 2, students will take longer to graduate since they will not have the respective classes to enroll through. All of these effects that I've enumerated are assuming the tax extensions will pass, which is a dangerous assumption, as we've learned. If they do not pass, it will simply be a nightmare for the master plan, a plan that hasn't had a good dream in a few years, I would say. So in light of these effects, on behalf of the California State Students Association, we would humbly request two demands. One, no more cuts, not to the budget of the CSU, but also to financial aid and Cal grants. And two, to allow the tax extensions to go on the ballot and to be decided on by the voters. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Teresa Ten. I'm with the Community College League of California, representing the CEOs and trustees of our 72 community college districts. I just wanted to kind of highlight again, obviously, Chair Bonilla, you raised the point very clearly at the very beginning of the hearing, the importance of higher education and being an economic engine of California. And as my colleague Jonathan Lightman indicated, districts are waiting with bated breath for that other shoe to drop. I'm very, very concerned about the scenarios that we're looking at, recognizing that we've already taken a Prop 98 cut of $400 million in this budget that was passed by the legislature just a short while ago. As Vice Chancellor Choi pointed out, we're looking at a worst-case scenario of perhaps turning away almost 400,000 students. And so, we're waiting for May Revise and the news that it will bring in terms of what our budget will hold. Couple of things I wanted to just share as we're moving through this process is that last year, when the budget was late and passed on October the 8th, community colleges did not receive any state apportionment until the budget was passed, which meant we were not in receipt of about $800 million that otherwise would have come if the budget was passed on time. In addition to the deferral that Vice Chancellor Choi mentioned that accounts for about 17% of our total funds, it makes cash management very, very difficult for our institutions. And so, as we're moving through this process, obviously don't want a quick resolution and a bad solution, but, hoping that, we can find the necessary resources to invest in the colleges and, hope that this will not drag out to October as last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Sanaida, and I'm here on behalf of the UC Student Association. We're 210,000 students, undergraduate, graduate, and professional students at the UC system. And so my name, again, is Sanaida, and I'm currently a senior at the University of California, and I'm here to share with you all my experience at UCSB as a senior. This quarter, I wasn't able to get into the 2 courses I need in order to graduate on time. And over the past couple of years, classes have rapidly filled over capacity, leading the professor-to-student ratio to dramatically increase. This has resulted in students having less contact with their professors. And unfortunately, I will have to stay at UCSB all summer to complete my majors in Global Studies and Chicano and Chicana Studies. And this unexpected event has forced me to postpone my plans for the summer and take out additional loans, increasing my debt to over $35,000. There are many students like myself who are being forced to stay additional quarters in school in order to finish their degree. My first and second years, I remember I didn't have to crash more than 2 courses per school year, but this year alone, I've had to crash over 6 classes. Several of my peers have also had to crash several classes. The last things that students need right now at this time is to be accepted to a UC, yet not be able to receive an education that they are eager to obtain. Additional cuts will force students with exceptional grades to not be able to afford a UC because of financial aid, because of economic reasons. So please, I ask you to take our stories as well as my peers' America's story into consideration when you're looking into cutting more to the UC system and the other CCs as well as CSUs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Bonilla, and honorable members of the Assembly Budget Subcommittee. My name is Robert Dalla, and thank you for allowing me to represent my organization, Q Teamsters Local 2010, by testifying at today's hearing. I represent the clerical workers at UC from UC Davis campus and UC Davis Sacramento Medical Center. I am an accounting assistant level 4 and have been with the university as a full-paying dues member of Q for 4 years this past Monday. I'm somewhat reluctant coming here due to the dire condition that the state finds itself. However, since your committee has some oversight over the UC and how it spends the state and other public dollars, I feel compelled to plead our case before you. Our organization, like many of the other UC bargaining units, has tried to work as harmoniously as possible with the UC administration during our normal negotiations, and sometimes we are able to work out our differences. However, more so than not, we run into difficulties obtaining information that should be available to everyone under the Open Records Act. I'm sure you've been reading or listening to the news media accounts on how poorly the UC is rated in obtaining information that would normally be available through most public agencies. I would hope that you would ask the UC reps why they are so slow in supplying the information being requested by the public and more specifically their employees. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this is our final public speaker.
Yes, hello. My name is Anitra Henderson. I'm QIBT Local 2010 President. And I am here on behalf of the employees of the Clerical Staff Unit. First of all, I'd like to thank you and your committee for allowing us the opportunity to appear before the committee today. However, I know it's difficult because the state economy, not only with the state of California, but in the United States and the rest of the world. My organization also knows that because of the fiscal problem the state and the country as a whole are facing, there are several open choices, most of them unfavorable secondary effects. However, I do have a script, but I'm really fit to get off the script. I'm here because my union has not had a raise since 2007. All the other bargaining teams have had raises. When it comes to my unit, they blame it on the state. Our funding is only 30% of the state budget. And it's really difficult. We wonder, is it because we're mainly women and minorities? Is how come we're not getting raises? We've bargained with UC for over a year. We have been in mediation, fact-finding, still yet no money comes to us. And they keep blaming it on the state, which, like I said, our funding is only 30% is coming from the state. So therefore, I'm here today asking if we can get the supplementary report language, which was offered, what was given to us since 2008. Because of Brown-Lee's, I told you I'm a little bit off my script. Because of Brown-Lee's Act, he signed into law, doing away with many of the reporting requirements, we haven't been getting this report. But we were told by the office staff that that language should not impact us. So we still can't figure out how come we are not getting this report. It is very important to us to get this report because we would like to see where are the monies being distributed through the UC. UC has other funding resources, and they're not mentioning that. They're not giving us any of that information, but yet they keep blaming the state. And out of the 30%, only $2.5 billion is what not funded from UC out of the 5,000. So it seems like there's no hope for us. We have done everything. So being said that, I may go back to my script. I'm sorry, I just had to say that because I've been real passionate. It's been real hard. We have been struggling for years, and we have mothers that's on housing, public assistance, getting welfare, food stamps, and it's just not right. It's not right, and we really want someone to look into it. So being said that, I'm just going to be finished. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have one more speaker?
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is John Ryan. I'm a senior at Sacramento State University. I've lived in California since 1996. I've attended public high school in Redding and also went to junior college at Shasta College up in Redding. I eventually transferred to Sac State, where I'll graduate this spring with a degree in government and also in economics. This fall, I plan to attend law school, which is a dream of mine since high school, really. Unfortunately, instead of attending one of the fine California schools I've been accepted to, I will be attending the University of Minnesota. In large part, this is due to cost. I've chosen Minnesota over similarly ranked schools like UC Davis, a longtime top choice of mine, and UC Hastings, because the out-of-state tuition to Minnesota next year is several $1,000s cheaper than the prospective in-state tuition at UC Davis or Hastings. It costs approximately $41,000 per year to attend Minnesota out of state compared to Davis, which is approximately $45,000 a year in-state. Throw in the cheaper cost of living in Minnesota, as well as better job prospects because of the larger urban area, and a $22,000 per year scholarship that was made possible to me by the university because of its endowment. And this decision adds up to approximately $75,000 to $80,000 per year. As much as I love my home state of California, for my family and for my future, I must turn my education needs elsewhere. For my family and for my future, I'm leaving California, and although I hope I may one day return, I know there are no guarantees. This used to not be the case with higher education in the state of California. This was once a beacon to students around the country and around the world as a place for quality, affordable education. And I hope that we can begin to turn that trend around and begin to fund these colleges and universities again, and make it so once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is really our final speaker.
Do I push something here? Or?
No, you're fine.
Okay. I just have to get this off my chest, and since I was here today, I appreciate you listening because UC does not. I'm staff clerical with the Teamsters. As the gentleman from Cal State University said, they had to let a vice provost or chancellor go. And so 2 other people took over that position, and they got raises. Staff at UC has not had raises since '07, has not had the contract. We have lost staff. We've taken on more workload. I feel like I am being pulled under the water, gasping for breath because of the workload, and we get totally ignored. Nothing. The staff on campus are so burned out. We feel so unappreciated, and we are one of the main groups of people that work with the faculty and with all the students who are coming into the campuses. We carry a lot of the workload. And as I said, there's money. We went furloughed last year. We've done our parts, but we are totally overlooked. And this has been going on for so long, so many years. And I was here a couple years ago on this topic too. And there's money for the chancellor of UC for his pension and all this other perks that they get. And I'd like to see more cuts coming and filter down to the staff who are there 5 days a week, year round. I'm going on 19 years, and it's going to be hard to retire because of the salary cuts after that. But thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and we should say that we certainly appreciate, as we talk about higher education, not only the needs of students, but also the faculty members, the staff members, all those who are working hard. We know making a lot happen with fewer and fewer resources, and so certainly the committee wants to express our appreciation in the midst of all the challenges, in the midst of the cuts, for all of the hard work that is going forward, and certainly heartily endorse good communication, transparency, information being shared and out in the public, and that's one thing we do here in the public hearing setting, is try to get as much information out for discussion. So we certainly appreciate all of our the reports we received, our public comment, and know that we're facing many challenges ahead of us, and so communication is certainly key to us being able to navigate forward in this difficult time, and communication is going to continue to be even more and more important as things become more critical. With that, I believe I'll adjourn our meeting. Again, thank you to all the participants. Good evening.